give you a chance, and you've been asked about this earlier. You said in, I think, your press conference, essentially, and I'll quote you here, "No quarter, no mercy for our enemies." That's the end of the quote. Is your guidance that you expect our troops in harm's way, if there's a foreign enemy surrendering, laying down their arms, they're supposed to provide no quarter and kill them?
You denied it, but you were indeed trying to take the chairman to a partisan place. That was General Milley. That was the previous administration, which played politics. We don't play that way.
It's a simple question. I'm asking you what you meant.
We fight to win, and we ensure the rules of engagements are such that our troops have every authority possible to be.
I'll give you another chance. In saying that, are you trying to tell commanders that that's what you expect? You're in the chain of command. It's a simple question.
I understand that. My commanders know exactly what the guidance is with each and every mission, and they know every tool.
Secretary,
every tool at
in
their disposal
refusing
to be
to answer
effective.
it, I think you speak volumes. I think that's a dangerous thing. We all know the expectations. We know the law of war. We know what is lawful. I'd expect our commanders to understand that as well. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Guam, Mr. Moylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Head Staff, thank you for your continued attention to Guam. Really appreciate it, and while leading the War Department here, and I'd like to remind my colleagues that one of your first official trips as Secretary was to visit Guam. And during your confirmation hearing, you identified the island as America's most strategic location globally. And this commitment does not go unnoticed, sir. So I thank you, Mr. Secretary, for that. And as we continue our buildup for the defense of our nation in Guam and the people of Guam, as we have many active duties personnel, but we also have a lot of Department of War civilian personnel too. And right now, one of our my most consistent question from my constituents have been asking is, when would the living quarter allowance authorization for War Department civilians in Guam, when will it be implemented? And recently, your office confirmed that the guidance should be published early May. Will you work to keep that timeline? And will you work to ensure living quarter allowance will properly incentivize local hires to stay on Guam?
Well, if that's what we stated, we need to stick with it. That's been our pledge. And I think it reiterates that the amount we're paying to pay for housing and for quality of life and living at certain, especially unique locations, is usually mismatched, and it causes staffing and workforce problems that we need to address in a tailored nature to some of those unique locations, like Guam, like Hawaii, and others in Europe. So yes, we're committed to that. And I would just note that in our budget, we've got almost $1 billion for the Guam defense system. Also, we're investing in ensuring that that critical location you described is part of our theater umbrella.
Excellent, sir. Thank you for that. Another longstanding request I have from the War Department has been the increased support for Guam's power grid. As you know, we all, the one island approach there and working together, our water, our power, our port, our airports, our hospital, it's all in support, working together with the military. Well, one of the important ones for us is Guam's power grid. And most of Guam's grid is owned by the department and is leased to the Guam Power Authority. And as the military demands upon the power grid increases, do you see either O&M funds or military construction funds being the best path for the department to support Guam's power grid needs?
I'd welcome your input, first and foremost, as we have throughout. But as was noted, we've got $450 million for small modular reactors, which is a new approach we're taking, which we think makes our bases more resilient. If there's one place the American people count on being able to be prepared in that moment, it's our bases wherever they are, whether CONUS or OCONUS. And these reactors are a key part of getting at it. So that would be part of how I would answer your question.
I appreciate that, Mr. Secretary. Also, the Guam Power Authority is the only one in charge of all the transmission lines. So we're that power source, and I know there was some consideration of the small nuclear reactors as well, but the Power Authority will be the one for the transmission lines for all the power on the island. So looking forward to working with your office. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Another deep concern for the people of Guam has been the cost of housing, which is often driven up by large numbers of servicemen living on base in Guam, op base on Guam, and I've been impressed by the recent efforts by Joint Regional Marianas to reduce the reliance on existing housing stock in both north and south of Guam. Can you tell us how the Department of Housing strategy in Guam will work to keep homes affordable to locals, and if increased private sector involvement would help address my constituents' concerns?
Well, we've got about $4.5 billion for family housing in the FY27 budget. It's something we recognize as a challenge, and in places like that, a unique challenge. There's also been a bureaucratic construction process, which has been a huge impediment, and you can imagine President Trump has demanded that we do something different and accelerate a different process to deliver those things in a more of a private sector, less bureaucratic fashion, and we look forward to employing those.
Excellent, sir. And finally, we did have one discussion when we first met in Guam regarding the Medal of Honor possible recipients that are deserving of this. Now, Guam has never had any Medal of Honor recipients, and there's three names that we've...
Gentleman's time's expired.
Thank you.
I would like to point out, once I recognize a member, they have control of that 5 minutes. If they want to give a speech, they can give a speech. If they want to ask questions, they can ask questions. But if you ask a question, I would hope you give the witness a chance to answer. But if they choose not to, then the witness has to recognize it's their time and cut it off and go back to them. But I want to stick...
Sorry, go ahead.
I want us to be respectful of each other and be able to make sure we maximize the use of this time. But everybody has to understand it's the members' 5 minutes once I recognize. Did the ranking member want to offer something?
Yeah, I just want to second that. Yeah, it is members' time. I do hope members, you do ask a question, got to allow for more than 2 words. Yes, if they filibuster or don't answer the question, feel free to interrupt. But I hope we can keep this respectful and it's more productive for us and for the witnesses and for those watching. Great. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And with that, we will recognize the gentlelady from Hawaii, Mr. Kuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On February 2nd, President Trump said we should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting, despite the Constitution assigning primary responsibility for elections to the states. Federal law also draws very clear limits. Under 18 U.S. Code Section 592, military officers are prohibited from deploying troops or armed personnel to polling places unless necessary to repel armed enemies of the United States. That is this exception, not politics, not suspicion, not conspiracy theories, armed enemies. Secretary Hegseth, do you think American voters are enemies of the United States? A simple yes and no or suffice.
I think legal voters, I think everybody who's legal should vote, yes.
So American voters are not enemies of the United States? Yes. You're agreeing with me?
I think America's legal citizens should vote, yes.
How many armed enemies of the United States have attempted to interfere in the last election? Can you recall any time when armed enemies of the United States attempted to interfere in the last election or the 2020 election?
We just had the King of England here a while ago, but
So
they
250
tried to
years
interfere.
ago. Okay, very good. All right. Well, Secretary Hegseth, if President Trump ordered you to deploy troops to polling places during the midterm elections this fall, which would violate the law I just cited, would you implement his order? Yes or no?
What you're trying to insinuate is that the president would give unlawful orders and we would somehow deploy troops as a result. And the evidence of our department is that we've worked alongside law enforcement very effectively for 15 months. Los Angeles would have been on fire for the summer had we not come across
I humbly disagree with that, but this is not a
law
hypothetical
enforcement friends and
situation
help
that
them
I'm
out.
inferring on. Your president in January of this year told the New York Times that he regretted not ordering the National Guard to seize voting machines in key states after the 2020 election. Last I heard from you, the last time we had any kind of armed enemies at any type of voting places was 250 years ago. We're talking 2020. So if the president, again I'm asking you, orders you to break election law, violate the Constitution and the law, would you follow the orders of the president, yes or no?
The president, you like to insinuate that the president issues
It's a
illegal
simple
orders, which he hasn't
question.
and does not.
Who would you follow, the president or the
I
Constitution?
will note that in 2024, troops were deployed. That was Joe Biden, by the way.
Who
Joe
would
Biden
you send
were
to-
deployed to polling locations in 15 states. 2024, Joe Biden, troops deployed to polling locations in 15 states. Explain that one to me.
I am asking you a question now. You seem to really like Joe Biden. You've brought his name up more than many other topics today. Answer the question. Who are you beholden to, Mr. Secretary, the president or the Constitution?
Well, I
If
very
you can't answer
proudly-
that question,
I
'cause you
very
couldn't
proudly
answer
served
that
as
question
president
when I
and
asked you,
very
would you shoot
proudly swear an
innocent
oath to
civilians
defend
in
the
the leg
Constitution.
in Los Angeles. So you couldn't answer that either. So I think our answer